talk today called that I call the long rifle and the DaVinci Code. Every year there's a convention of gun builders down in Pennsylvania called the Dixon's Gun Fair. And in the late 90s, a guy named Pat Howell, here's Pat on the back of this book, he showed up down there with an original gun and a pair of what he called proportional dividers, and he proceeded to wow us all. We stood in awe as he showed us stuff that he had figured out. Now, I read the same source material that Pat read, and a lot of it went, I said, oh, that's real nice, you know, that's real nice theoretical stuff, but I couldn't see a real practical application to the stuff I read. Pat was a math teacher and an industrial arts teacher. So those two preparations really, so when he read the same stuff I read, he immediately said, well, I'll just make a pair of proportional dividers. And he went on and he went on to wow us all at the Dixon's Gun Fair. And everybody said, Pat, you got to write a book. And so Pat did it. He wrote this little book called See Through the Eyes of Yesterday, and the subtitle, The Kentucky Rifle and the Golden Mean. And what he did was he took, with permission, line drawings from this 1960 edition from the Kentucky Rifle Association, where every gun is photographed in the same orientation and the same size and everything. It's a well-known book, been around for 50 years. He took the line drawings from some of these and proceeded to show us how to proportion them out the way the old-time gunsmiths did. And he shows us little sequences of. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm stealing from Pat Howell's book. He passed away not long ago, so he won't mind. All right, so let's talk about the DaVinci Code and the long rifle, what connection there might be, and there's some sort of a connection to every living thing. A lot of people, I used to say before I knew any of this, describing this, I say, it should look like it grew out in the forest, and you went out and found it, and you cut it down. Because the wood is all molded around all the metal parts, and there's a whole lot of foliage all over this gun. So it kind of looks like it grew. I didn't know how close I was to the truth. So we got to start, the deep background of this goes way back, before the Greeks. There was an intuitive way of knowing how a line was divided, the way nature would divide it. And the Greeks, of course, were the smart ones. Somebody tried to tell me, oh, all cultures are the same, equal. He didn't know anything about the Greeks, did he? They figured everything out that we know today. They already figured it out. And so they were trying to decide how nature would divide a line like this in a natural way. In a way that gives you both unity and diversity. Two contradictory ideas. So how would you divide a line to give both of those? Because that's what Greeks saw in nature. They saw everything, all the fish had fins and gills and swam in the water. But there was a lot of diversity among the fish. There's 20,000 kinds of saltwater fish. They're all different. So there's this unity superimposed over this diversity. So how would we divide this line here to give us a measure of both in the two pieces that result? Where do we want to divide it first? Right in the middle. Perfect unity. Zero diversity. It has no diversity whatsoever. So it can't be in the middle. You get two equal pieces. Where's your diversity? And that's boring. That's called a static balance. There's no movement there. They're equal. So what about like way over here? That's not good either. And here we have all this diversity. This is a real big piece, and this is a real little piece. That's too diverse. We need some more unity here. So somewhere between, say, 3/4 and 50%, there's a stop. About 2/3, right? Or you know, 0.66 mathematically. That doesn't work either because your major piece is still twice as big as your minor piece. So now we're getting down closer. So somewhere between 50 and 0.5 and 0.66. Is there a perfect spot? This was the question the Greeks were asking. Euclid steps in and says, you're a bunch of punters. He says, this is the way you want to do it. You want to do it right there. And he says, right there is, in relation to your original line, he said, oh wait a minute, I got this a little run your original line to this smaller line be the same ratio as this smaller line is to the little bitty one. So the little one to the middle one is the same ratio as the middle one is to the big one. Simple, common sense. The implications of this, people are still writing their PhDs on it. That sounds so simple. Oh, let this be the same ratio. Everything else flows from this. So when you calculate this now to find out what kind of number this represents, we know it's 0.6 something. You let this be 1. Let this one we want to find out be x, and this is 1 minus the x. And what Euclid says that x is to 1 minus x as 1 is to x. If those are equal, you'll find exactly the right spot. And so you can, any math teachers in here? Good. Because if you cross multiply this, you get x squared is equal to 1 minus x. 1 minus x. X squared. And then this will fit into a quadratic formula, which I remember from high school. I know it had b's and minus b's. And so we have x squared minus x minus 1 equal to 0. And this is a, b, and c. The minus 1 is c. Pythagorean theorem. Well, no, it's a quadratic formula. It says minus b plus or minus x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared plus 4ac over 2b. You just plug all. Fortunately for us, all our numbers, a, b, and c, are all 1. And so if you plug those numbers into here and you multiply it all out, you get a number. You get two numbers because it said it was b plus or minus. So you're going to get two numbers. You get plus 1.618141367. A number that goes on forever like pi. It's an irrational number. Has no end. The other number you get is minus 0.61814. So the number behind the decimal point is the same in both our things. So we don't really care about the 1.6. We're worried, we want to define the position along our line, and we don't care about the minus sign either. This here is at 0.61814, and so on. So that's where that division is. That's exactly where it is. Except we don't know exactly where that is it? Because we don't even know exactly what that number is. That's an irrational number that goes on forever and ever and ever. And so if you're really a stickler, you could never figure out exactly where that is. But you could get to it as close as you could possibly measure. They've calculated this to 1.5 billion places, and it never repeats. A lot of irrational numbers will repeat, like 0.333333 repeats forever. They got a name for this number. Phi. I'm going to have to do all this left-handed. P-H-I. Named after a guy named Phidias. And I just came across it in some other reading. When the Persians burnt down the Acropolis in Greece, when they attacked there, Xerxes, making up for his dad's defeat, Xerxes burns it down. The Greeks hired this guy Phidias to rebuild the Acropolis. So he's responsible for the Parthenon and all that beautiful Greek architecture. They named this number in honor of Phidias. So it's called Phi. The number, I call it Phi. And you get a dynamic balance. They call this a dynamic balance because they're not equal and you can see some movement. Quadratic formula. Phi. This is a cool number. It's so simple, right? This little ratio here. But check this out. The big phi is the 1.618, and little phi is the minus 0.618. Big phi. My wife tells me not to do this stuff, but it's so cool. Big phi times little phi is equal to 1. Okay? big phi minus little phi is equal to 1. How many numbers you know that you can multiply and subtract, and you just get the same damn number? Of course, big phi is 1 minus little phi, and little phi is 1 plus, or big phi is 1 plus little phi. The reciprocal of big phi is equal to little phi. And the reciprocal of little phi is equal to big phi. And here's my favorite. This one really throws me for a loop. Phi squared. Phi squared is equal to phi plus 1. How many more weirdnesses can this number have? Okay, I'll tell you how many weird. My wife tells me not to talk about a continuing fraction, because you could express this number as a continuing fraction, which I never ever. I can't even figure that out. It's just a long, long fraction with everything underneath it. So you can't express this number exactly mathematically. How do you find it? Well, mostly you find it with geometry. So if you had a circle, the hemisphere there, the biggest square you can draw inside this hemisphere divides this line exactly at our number. So you don't have to know it mathematically, you can find it exactly with geometry. That's one way. Another way, without the circle, you could just say, take a line, half the diagonal of half the square. Rotate that to the baseline, that's the same. Can you do it with 3 equal lines? This is something I just learned. I'm learning new stuff about this all the time. Just go online and Google phi. Forget it, man. You find websites just about other websites. A whole website of websites about phi. So how do you find phi with 3 equal lines? Something I just learned. So you have a baseline here. Take your one line here, 90 degrees. Take this one at half. Take your next line, lay it half there. Half there. Boom. There's phi. I had no idea that you could do this until about a couple of months ago. So that's another way to find phi. And pretty soon I'm going to ask you if you can figure out a way to find it from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight lines. Equal. We'll get to that in a minute. So now that we have our phi division, the first thing the Greeks did was made a rectangle out of it. And they called this the golden mean rectangle. And they decided that at 0.61814, this irrational number, was just way too crazy. They needed a simple fraction. And so what did they decide on? What's close to 0.61? 0.60, right? 3 to 5. 0.600, right? They thought about 5 to 8, but that's more complicated. It only gets you to 0.625. Neither one of them are exactly phi. They decided 3 and 5 was close enough. And so this became the golden numbers. And so the first thing they did was make a triangle out of 5 and 3. Or rather a rectangle. They call this the golden mean rectangle. Probably got some over in your house. You got a 3 by 5 card, you do, right? What about a 5 by 8 card? Say, hey. What about 8.5 by 14 legal paper? Same shape. So all 3 of those pieces of paper that we use today in the 20th century, 2,500 years ago, the Greeks were figuring it out, that that's the right shape. This is the natural shape. This is the shape nature likes. So here's our golden mean rectangle. It's made up of a square and another small rectangle left over. This is called a gnomon. G-N-O-M-A-N. This is very central to our talk. This gnomon here is exactly the same shape as what we started with, only it's a little smaller. You draw a diagonal through your gnome, and a diagonal through your rectangle. Right there is called the eye of the thing. And there's 4 of those, one here, one here, one here, if you draw your diagonal. If you're an artist, they call that the eye of the painting. You put your subject matter in any one of those eyes, and your eye is drawn to that eye. So you got a square and a rectangle. Well, you can square this rectangle too, right? So now we have another square and another gnomon, only smaller yet. Square that, square that, square that. And you can see these little squares whirl about the eye. The eye is right in the center of these little squares. And if you draw an arc in each square equal to the length of a side, what do you get? It's the only spiral that can be drawn with a simple compass. You get a perfect spiral. So now I walk over here. Pick up my Nautilus shell. This is the spiral you draw with this simple 3-5 formula that we figured out. It's exactly like this spiral in here. Proportional dividers. The 3 side and the 5 side. So anything I put here, 5, it's going to be the same ratio here. If we go across the spirals of the Nautilus shell on the 5 side, the inner spiral is a 3. And we go 5 there, that inner spiral is 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, until you can't do it anymore. So there's something in this little 3-5 formula, this mean and the Euclid called this the mean and the extreme in the same ratio. Okay? So that produces this spiral. As soon as they found this out, they said something like "Mamma mia" in Greek. We haven't discovered something here. We found there's some sort of connection between this mathematical formula and this snail. Okay? Let's see if I haven't forgotten anything here. Woman's whirl about the eye. Now, there's only 2 kinds of animals in evolution. There are 2 branches, 2 main branches. We're on one. The snails and the worms and the insects are on this branch. And we see that the snail has somehow this underlying structure in nature built into it. What about the other line of evolution, which is the starfish? We're starfish. The way that happens is when you have a fertilized egg, it first divides this way to make 2 cells, and then divides this way, it makes a few more, and eventually it divides this way. And when the cells sit on top of each other, that makes a starfish. If the cells sit in the grooves of the one below, in the grooves and grooves, that makes the snail, that makes the spiral. Snails do that, we do this, we sit on top. And so we are related to starfish. Just put our starfish up here. And see if he comports with this underlying structure of nature. Wow, that's a crappy star. It's important that this look like a star. So I'll try to do it better. It's got to be perfect. And why is this the symbol of perfection? What makes the star the symbol of perfection? We got it on our flag. Where's the flag? It was a symbol of the goddess before Christianity and stuff. The ancients used the star. You know, by the way, what about these 5 equal bars here? How are we going to find phi with those 5 bars? And if I give you 10 trees, could you plant them in 5 rows of 4? And there's 5 rows, 4 trees each. Hey, wait a minute, that adds up to 20 trees. I said you only have 10. How can you plant these 10 trees in that 5 rows of 4? You know I'm going to wind up with 10 dots on the board, right? There's your 10 trees in 5 rows of 4. It's a little off the subject. But why is that the symbol of perfection?
Balance.
Where do these lines cross? You know, I wonder if that distance there and that distance there isn't 5 to 3. And I wonder if this isn't here, to here to here is 5 to 3, 5 to 3, 5 to 3, 5 to 3. Every line crosses every other line exactly at phi. This is the perfect symbol. And if you draw this line here, across here, that's phi, that's 5 and 3. So the pentagon, which is, you know, pentagon, is really important in nature because, like the snail, the starfish has this inborn underlying structure of 5 to 3 built into it. So there's 2 lines of evolution, and by the way, all plants conform to this too. If you look down the stem of a plant, looking down the stem this way, The leaves come off here at the optimum number of leaves per whorl, 1.6. So it's that phi number. So plants and animals somehow have this built-in structure. So now we know all animals, all plants. And so that's how you find it with the 5 bars, you know, the 5. If you cross them just right, you find phi with 5. Okay? Animals, plants. Something about phi is in all nature. We're going to jump ahead now from the Greeks to the Italians.
No,
Mom.
not the Italian.
We're going to go to a guy named Leonardo da Pisa. Leonardo da Pisa. And there's a statue of him next to the Tower of Pisa, twice life-size. His other name was Fibonacci. He was a famous mathematician. He introduced Greek, or what am I saying now, Arabic numbers to the Western world. Before Fibonacci came along in 1202, these were in the 13th century, we were still using Roman numerals. He introduces Arabic numbers to the Western world, which we use now. He was in a math competition in 1202, and he used a pair of rabbits as a metaphor for showing the increase with each generation if a certain number of breeding. So they had a pair of rabbits, Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit. They live, in his little formula, they live 2 months and then reproduce and make 2 more rabbits. Okay, these live a couple months and then they have another couple rabbits. Meanwhile, these have another couple rabbits. And so on, and the rabbits start to add up. He showed that they add up in a certain way, and it was really predictable. First you had 1 pair, and you had 2, and you had 5, and then 13. And so rabbits don't multiply, but they do add up. And in fact, they just start adding the integers as they go. 2 and 3 is 5, 2 and 5 is 8, 8 and 5 is 13. We're down here to 34. So they add up in this real predictable way. What's the other thing I just learned? Okay, I learned something new just again. Fibonacci. Here's a female bee. Here's a male bee. Bumblebee, or a honeybee. I think I got them backwards. But how many parents do they have? The female bee has to have 2 parents because she comes from a fertilized egg. She had a male and a female. She had a mom and a pop. The male bee only had a mom. Right? It's an unfertilized drone. The grandparents, the female bee had to have 3 grandparents. 1 to make the male, 2 to make the female. 2 here. 5, 8, 13, 21, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. So the number of parents in each generation of bees is somehow related to this Fibonacci number too. And you notice that it's not only the Fibonacci series this way, also in this direction. 5 and 3, 8 and 5, 8 and 13. Don't ask me what that means. That's just an aside. Okay? So the bees, or the rabbits, add up in this fashion, and what do we see in here? We see 2 of our numbers, right? We see 3 and 5, and we see 5 and 8. This is 0.6. This is 0.625. 8 and 13 is more like 0.619. Recognize these fractions? And then further out you go in this series, and you can go to infinity, and it won't quite get there, but it'll almost get exactly to 0.61814. So somehow, each generation of rabbits proceeds in the same ratio that we showed with our sticks and stuff. What's the deal here? How come this is related to these other animals? What's the connection? Connection is this. that we're all made out of cells. Us and the rabbits and the plants, we're all multicellular organisms. We all start out like that egg, fertilized egg, and we start to divide. First there's 1, then there's 2 cells, then there's 3 cells, then there's 5, and then there's 8, and then there's 13, and 24, 31. And when you're done with 20 billion cells in your body, every new generation of cells that you grew in this same ratio of 3 to 5. This phi relationship is in every generation of cells as you grew. So what DaVinci shows us with the Vitruvian man, that's the guy in the circle. So we're going to go now up to the Renaissance, from Fibonacci in the 13th century to the Renaissance. Da Vinci draws us the Vitruvian man in the circle. Vitruvius was a Roman emperor, and he was an architect, and he used these ratios in his architecture. So Da Vinci picks him as the guy in the circle. And what do you know is he's showing us? 5 and 3. Okay, we're going to make the, we'll go this way now, all the way up to the end. 5 to 3. First bone in the hand is a 5, the next bone is a 3. 5 to 3. Kind of like the snail. Kind of like the whorls around the snail. The human body, and top of the head to the belly button. 3, there to the ground, 5.
Same numbers.
Da Vinci is showing us, and this is what they learned in the Renaissance was, and think about medieval art. The figurines are all kind of weird and disproportionate and shaped kind of strange, tall and skinny or weird. You jump ahead to Da Vinci and the Renaissance people are perfect. They're all proportioned. They rediscovered this stuff. So in the book, the Da Vinci Code, a priest is dying from being stabbed, and he's in a big cathedral, and on the floor in blood, he writes this series of numbers, 13, 21, 35. It's the Fibonacci series scrambled to make a code. And so somebody gave a heads up to read the book because I would get the clue. And sure enough, when I saw that, I knew exactly what those numbers meant. Hell, I had just made these. 3, 5, 8, 8, 13, 21. I knew what those numbers were. That made me feel real chuffed. I now know that every mathematician, every art historian knows all this stuff too, but I thought that was pretty special. Okay, so we're all the way through Vitruvian man. So then, after the Renaissance, there became this period, like leading up to the Louis, the 14th century. I'm just going to take a little side trip into Baroque and Rococo. Baroque came along in the 17th century. The French king, it was Louis XIV, used it like with state power. He had power over art. That means he had power over a lot of things, and they had specified. Baroque art uses spirals, like we're just familiar with, leaves and foliage and stuff, in a rectilinear 3 by 5. This is let's say a mirror in a room. A Baroque mirror would be 3 by 5, almost assuredly. It would have a top kind of like this. It would have this vine foliage, even some faces and stuff. Foliage like this. All our 3 to 5 foliage. A little further on, in like the early 18th century, it comes in, this is Baroque. B-A-Q-U-E, Baroque. And this is very, thank you, this is hard work. Baroque is really good for architecture. So a lot of architecture, mason guys, is Baroque because it's rectilinear. And of course it's a beautiful, like the facade on an 18th century house, a Georgian house that we're all so familiar with around here. It's a 3 by 5 rectangle, and the window is probably a gnomon of the facade, 3 by 5, and the panes in the windows are probably 3 by 5, and so on. But in a Baroque mirror, it looks like that. A Rococo mirror goes one step further. They take this decoration stuff and make the mirror out of it. So a Rococo mirror looks like this. The decoration now just isn't applied to the outside of the frame. It is the frame. So that in a rococo, and rococo means a misshapen pearl in Italian. It's misshapen. It's not regular. On a long rifle, before we get too far along, this is considered an American rococo. This cheek piece isn't separate from these two pieces of carving. This foliage tracks along the edge of this cheek piece. This cheek piece is a piece of the foliage itself. The way that mirror was, so this is called a rococo rifle from about 1780. Okay. We are 50 years behind the Europeans. This became popular in Europe, rococo, 1720. Didn't really come around America until about 1770. A little bit behind the time. Okay, so now we're going to jump to the 18th century, the same century in which the gun was made. Famous English artist named Gainsborough. If you go in an art book, you're going to find a picture of a Gainsborough 18th century picture. It's in a 3x5 frame. What else? Now, if you have a diagonal through our rectangle here, any rectangle you draw whose corner falls on the diagonal, it's a gnomon of the original. So you can keep that in mind. In the picture, Mr. Andrews stands here. He's got a tricorn hat. I'm a great artist. He has a fowling piece over his arms. He's just shot a bird. Mrs. Andrews sits on a bench here. She has a big flowing gown. I think she has the partridge in her lap. She's her hair. And then there's a tree out here and then a sheaf of wheat in the field in the background. Harvest. If you draw a diagonal through here, and you take this short side of this rectangle, make it the long side here, it falls like right on the tree. Take this short side, it falls right on her head. So an 18th century piece of art was smaller and smaller gnomons. Each one of these little rectangles here is a perfect match to the original. And so there is this harmony of design and beauty. Look at 18th century goods. They're all kind of beautiful. That's because they used this 3:5 ratio in everything they did in the 18th century. Even musical instruments, almost everything is made by a craftsman is done with this stuff in mind. So, well, by the way, on this, see this curve, this is called a C scroll. Right here. This right here. Back to the rococo. A Baroque C-scroll in earlier rifles is like this. Two symmetrics, maybe a little ribbon to tie the two pieces together. Symmetric, equal. The rococo different, not the same. Equal, unequal. So this is unequal. If you look at the C-scrolls on there, one is very large, the other is very small, probably 3:5 ratio. So we're going to jump ahead now to J.P. Beck. Beck. He was probably a Moravian. Who are the Moravians? If you go down to Pennsylvania, you know, just reading another book. In the 18th century, they called them peace Germans, or church Germans. Those are the two names they gave these people. These are pacifist people. They would not fight. In fact, the Moravians originated in Czechoslovakia, where when they didn't fight, they got kicked out. A German prince named Count Zinzendorf, he was a Lutheran bishop, gave them enough land for 2 towns. See a lot of land to spare. He also financed them to come to Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and places south of Pennsylvania, to make money. They had to make money. And they were, because they got kicked out of Czechoslovakia, they became they're almost like the Jews. They had to have a mobile trade to take gunsmith. Instrument making, innkeeping, that was their forte. So they came to Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Lidditz, Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. These were all German towns. In fact, they spoke they spoke German until the Civil War. J.P. Beck, born in Rotterdam, came to America at age 2 in the 1750s. He was one of the famous makers. And by the Revolutionary War, he was already making guns. And what he made was stuff like this. This is a J.P. Beck, copy of a J.P. Beck rifle. In fact, it's such an important rifle, Pat Hallam gives it a special chapter in his book. That's why I built it. Here's the one thing Pat didn't show. This is my contribution to this. I picked that rifle up and hold it at its balance point. What Pat did was went to that book and he did everything visually out of the book. But if you pick the gun up and hold it here, what do you know? What's the proportion from there to there?
3 to 5.
It is 3 to 5. And this kind of answers for me and a lot of people, why was the barrel that long? Didn't have to. The barrel would function just right if it was about that long. All this is kind of, why bother? I think that's why. Because this beautiful balance there. So if you look at the rifle, there's your first gnomon. This is our big gnomon that takes in the whole gun. We're now going to look at the gun from this point, the whole skinny part of the gun. Not this, but this is separate. From there to the muzzle, is there a transition point that needs to be identified? I have a big pair of these, but it won't work. What about this? This is called the entry pipe. This is where the ramrod goes from being exposed to disappearing into the stock. And there's a little piece here called the ramrod entry pipe. Where are you going to put that if you have this as your field? Where would this look good? Back here? Way out here? It only looks good in one place, and it has to function too. You have to be able to put your hand here. So it is, right there is 3 to 5. So we've now reduced the gun down to this piece here. From there to there. Is there an important location that might need to be identified? How about this thing here called the touch hole? That's the little hole in the side of the barrel through which the gun is ignited. It is the very center of the gun. It's the heart of the gun is that touch hole. Everything else about the gun is built out from the touch hole. And so, there, the touch hole is at the 3 to 5 point between there and there we just discovered. Look at the lock itself. Now the German guy, Beck didn't make the lock. Somebody in England probably made the lock. The proportion of the lock behind the touch hole, 5, and the proportion of the lock in front of the touch hole is a 3. So you can see we've done about 5 steps. We went boom, 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 boom. In each step, proportional to the previous. The mean and the extreme in the same ratio. Same thing with the cock. The cock from the lower end of the cock to the lower jaw, 5, 3 to the top. So that's the non-artistic parts of the gun. Now, this was the artistic part of the gun. This is the part of the gun. This is called a patch box. The little cloth patch that goes around your bullet is stored in there. It's a greasy little cloth patch. Where are you going to carry that? In your pocket? No. You have to have access to it. This became the focus of decoration. This is a funny thing that happens. Back in 2010, History Channel comes to my shop to film an episode of Modern Marvels called Built by Hand. So I'm one of 5 guys who make stuff by hand. During that I talk about the patch box. This is an American invention. The Europeans had a sliding wooden door. America invents this brass thing and it quickly becomes a center of decoration and focus. You can kind of attribute the maker by the design of the patch box. So I explain all that. 2 years ago, this was back in 2010, it aired in 11. 2 years ago, 2 guys from the Little Rhodey Model A Club are coming to my shop as advanced men to see if they can take their spring outing into my shop, you know. So I got the gun up in the rack. I start telling one of the guys about the patch box. He says, "Oh, wait a minute. I know all about this. I saw it on television." He starts telling me about it. You know, I'm thinking, what show did he see about my subject that I didn't see? And it dawned on me, it was me. He saw me, and in his area standing talking in the same place about the same gun. So I let him finish, and I said, "You know where you saw that?" "No, I get it right here." I'm in astonishment, you know. When you see something on television, it could be anywhere. You don't know where it was filmed. So that's amazing. So anyway, this is the important artistic part of the gun. The patchbox, like I said, America's first artistic expression, totally, utterly American. The way you start on this is take the gun, the lock here is the heart of the gun, you go 5, and then come back twice, 3. And that point falls right here where the stock steps down from this point right there. So we're going to call this the field of view. Now, see the shape of this? Now, do you think the builder actually held this up to somebody's body and figured out where this cheek piece has to go and where this cheek? How would you be wrong about that? They didn't have to do that. Because here's how they figured out where that was going to go. They just used our sticks, 5, from the back of the barrel to the end of the stock. And that's how big that piece has to be. That's the shape of your buttstock, not something they held up against your body to say, hey, where does this have to go? Okay? Now, this is the important artistic piece here. How big does it have to be proportional to the buttstock? Of course, you know it has to be that big. It has to be a 3 to match. What about itself? It has a door and a finial here. What do you want to know? That the door is 5 to 3, the whole thing, okay? The finial itself has a flower, it's actually a swastika, it's a swirling flower, it's a swastika. It's 5 to 3 with the whole thing. If we flip this around, the cheek piece, same way. We're going to go from the anchor point to find the front of the cheek piece. Make that a 5. And we find the rear of the cheek piece. The location of the cheek piece on the buttstock, 5 to 3. That eagle was a 3 by 5 rectangle. When I started, I cut out a 3 by 5 rectangle. That's how big that is, 5 by 3. And it falls right at the 3 position on the stock. Same thing with the width. 5 here, and where this is 3 in width, in length, it's also 3 in width. If you go 5 here, it's 3 here, where it was 3 in length, it's also 3 in width. So these overlap. It's true of the trigger guard, every screw. This is called a side plate. It's actually a big washer for the lock. So the functional part is right under the 2 screw heads. What's this tail thing for? What's this piece about? It has no function at all, other than to balance, 5 to 3. So the Kentucky rifle, people ask me, is it art? I think it is. Now, he was a religious guy. He was a Moravian, like I said. They wouldn't fight in the Revolution. And they had to pay a fine about equal to a year's salary every year that they didn't join the Pennsylvania forces. And the community supported the people and paid the fine, but they had to turn out a lot of guns in order to make up for the money that the Moravians. Dunkers, Schwenkfelders, Amish, Mennonite. There's a whole list of those people in that part of Pennsylvania.
So they just built guns.
They built guns, they built instruments like tubas and trumpets and stuff, and they ran inns. And it was a communal lifestyle. It was almost a communistic lifestyle. You gave your kid up at age 2. And they raised them communally. You got to see him twice a year. Weird. Very strange. Moravian. Okay, he was a religious guy. On the patch box, I'll have to draw this out. Bunch of foliage on here. But if you look close, you'll find something isn't foliage. And here's the patch box. It's got the flower thing up here. And then yeah, it's down in here. Here's a door. Right in here. And the way to find it is to take from the heart of the gun, the lock. There's a 5. Come back. Falls right on this little thing here, and it's a big oval. A large oval shaped like this. Just below it is a small, darker oval with wings. Okay? If you go from the heart of the lock back, the 3 falls right there on the middle of this one. This is called the mundane egg. Mundane meaning worldly, the world's egg. It's the egg from which the universe hatches. It's a symbol for God among the Moravians. So this is God, the mundane egg, or the universe. Now if you take the dividers again, you go from the anchor point, not the lock, but the anchor point, and you come back, the point falls right on the little oval. Now don't ask me about this. Piscis vesicus. Piscis vesicus. Literally in Latin means a fish bladder. That's a symbol for Christ. I don't know about Christian iconography that well, especially the German Moravian Christian iconography, but that little oval, the fish bladder, is a symbol for Christ. So here we have Christ arising on the wings of a dove towards heaven, built into his design right here. And if you're not familiar with that, I never knew this. Pat Hallam had to tell us all this. But that design falls right here. Mr. Beck's rifle. On the underside of his barrels, he had INRI. Now, what was that? I is J in the 18th century. J was shaped like
Jesus, King of the Jews.
Jesus Nazareth, Rex J Adorum, King of Jews. And so he was a very religious guy. And I maintain it made the rifle shoot better. He thought so. He died in 1811. He has, he had some cousins and stuff, and their guns are well regarded and stuff. A gun like that, the original gun like this, is probably $150,000 worth of gun. He's such a well-respected guy. And there is one similar to this, without this here, with an attribution to George Washington. And everybody believes it's true, because he was famous. And he was around when George Washington was around. And so this gun, he probably made that gun for George Washington. No. One other thing I show. Back in May, I bought an old gun. Albert, did you see these pictures?
I did.
I couldn't remember if I showed you the pictures.
I think I tried to buy one. I'm not sure.
Albert just came back from Philadelphia, where they opened a Revolutionary War museum.
Yes, they did.
And he says that the guy that made these 2 guns, there's a gun by him on display at the museum. What do you have there, Albert?
There's a gun by him, by you. Here.
Oh, that's your fellow. Yeah, we'll bring that up. But anyway, about this piece here. The Litchfield Historical Society Museum owns top one. And as soon as I saw them on the table together, I said, hey, both those guns were made from the same plank of wood. That was my prediction. So, we looked closer. They have the same lock. My gun still is in the percussion. It was converted to percussion probably in 1850. And this one has been reconverted back to the flint. But they're the same lock, same trigger guard, a little bit of damage in exactly the same place. Here's what makes this an important gun. When the butt's plated, like right up here, on the Fowler it's long and skinny, like this. Medad Hills. The Hills family is the most famous gun-making family of the 18th century in Connecticut. And this one here says, made by Medad Hills at Goshen. So they're Goshen, Connecticut builders. So we know now that Medad Hills is from Goshen. You wonder, when did he make this old gun? Well, both the wrist pieces, little shield, mine has this beautiful carving. No. 1758. Medad Hills was born in 29, and he was 30 years old when he was hitting his stride as a real good. His father was a gun maker. He apprenticed to his father. So he built both these guns in 1758. Litchfield, Illinois. On the top of the barrel, he has this long brass inlay. He has a day and the month in there. This is unheard of. I mean, the year on the wrist, not too uncommon. Their gun, August 26th. My gun, October 20th. Here's these 2 guns made in 1758, and they're together on the table. They were probably made in sequence, one right after the other, had never been together on the table before. One went east, the other went west. And when I said they were made out of the same plank of wood, if you look close at this picture, you would say, wow, those are the same pieces of wood, and it probably was. Theirs says on the side plate, Reverend Mr. Sylvanus Osborne. He was a Princeton grad and the first pastor of the Warren Congregational Church. Died in 1771. The little note accompanying this gun says, he carried the gun in the war, which was the French and Indian War. He was dead before the Revolution. So mine, you notice it's a different style of gun altogether. This is done in a British brown vest style, and this is in a commercial Fowler, you know, civilian Fowler. Mine was made for Sergeant, S-A-R-N-T above it, Alex Kinstry. His real name is Alexander McKinstry, and he's buried next to the Ellington Library in the McKinstry graveyard. He died in 1759. Hard luck family. He had twins. One died in 1750, the other in 57. The wife died in 58, and he died in 59.
So he only had the gun for a year?
He only had the gun for a year. And the surviving son was too young to take the gun, I think, at the time. The one surviving son is the great-grandfather of the Lieutenant Governor of Alabama and a colonel in the CSA. They went south after leaving Connecticut. So now I did go over the old gun I just got with the dividers, and it does comport, you know, the buttstock especially. There's not too much decoration on it, so you can't go into that. So that's a really neat piece of Connecticut history. Auction estimate, 30 to 50 pounds.
Wow.
Ridiculous.
You made that one, right?
Yeah, I make the copies. This is what I do for a living. I make copies of these famous guns out of books like like I just showed you here. For years we used this book, and there's a lot of really nice color books out that show you every view of the gun, so you don't have any questions about what the other side looks like. Pretty messy. I guess you can tell I probably built that one, huh? Got the coffee ring on it. But that's what I do. Copy these.
Power tools or hand tools? Power tools or hand tools?
Hand tools. I use a drill press, drill holes, but that's about it.
Power tool.
Yes, it is. And I use a bandsaw too. Now this knowledge of the 18th century, this DaVinci Code, this 3-5 golden mean stuff, that was passed on from master to apprentice all along that system until that system broke down, 1840. After 1840, there were no more master-apprentice systems. You worked in a factory to make a gun. You didn't know how it was designed. There was some guy up in the office designed it, and you were building it on your lathe and on your machines and stuff. But in the 18th century, when the master-apprentice system, the apprentice eventually learned how the gun was, and this knowledge, stopped being passed on in 1840. By 1890, it was all forgotten. So guns, after 1890, didn't know. And it was only, it was known among, like I said, mathematicians and art historians knew all this stuff. But think about modern art. Is there anything in a 3x5 rectangle? No, it's usually in a square or in some odd shape, and it's got a bunch of disproportionate pieces, and it's not integrated the way the 18th century did their art into this golden mean. Go ahead,
Ed?
Yes.
I assume that the principle also applies to other artisans in the 18th century.
Oh, almost all of them. And I keep stumbling across weird things like, you got a book on how to build a clay oven. The 18th century clay oven? How big do you think the door has to be in relation to the height? 0.6. The door has to be this 0.6 in relation to the whole height in order for it to function right, to get the smoke to come out. And I don't know, maybe.
And I had a question. You were elaborating the Etruvian man.
Yeah.
And the proportions to him. And you've elaborated the gun. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you think the gun, since man has the proportion to the shot, the arm, the leg, was the gun a copy to fit to the man? Or
No, I don't think so. I think they just knew about the proportionality from this, and they didn't have to use the man as a model. They knew that the man, well, I don't know if they knew this, but the man was made by the stick, made following the sticks, and so is the gun, so they're compatible. Yeah.
Well, to let you know, I know a couple of master gunsmiths out of Remington Arms,
Oh, yeah.
and they're all Masons.
Oh, no kidding. Well,
Made all the barrels, certified all the stocks, made all the actions.
huh.
You can't get on the machine floor in Remington, upstate New York, without being a Mason.
Oh, no kidding. Huh. Yeah, you know, I built Alvin a Mason gun, by the way.
You got a
Oh, yes.
Was most of the New England gun, was that more of a business gun as opposed to a showpiece? I mean, because
You mean, are New Englanders stingy and flint and cheap? Yes.
no, I mean, it was more of an object that was used.
Yeah, well, some of the Pennsylvania guns, they may have been decorated and all, but they were for use. They just didn't, and they made them without a lot of this
Yes,
decoration.
exactly.
And it may be that the decorated ones are the ones that have survived, so we have a kind of a skewed,
Yes.
sample of them. But a lot of New England guns were very plain and very utilitarian. Some were fancy. This Meadad Hills gun, has some carving and some silver plate on it and stuff. So this is a gun I built for Alvin on the Mason theme. Of course, I didn't realize, the legs, and, I didn't understand all that part. I thought it looked cooler with the leg behind it. I swear. Because it goes behind it, it looks really cool. So we have the square and the compass here with a G in the middle. Alvin's a Vinter importer, so we have the oval, which is a 3 to 5 golden mean oval with the star, which we know about in the middle, and it's surrounded by vines and grapevines. We have the moon and 7 stars down here. And I think I had the same thing somewhere else too. Oh yeah, in front of the trigger guard up here, there's a moon, crescent moon faced with 7 stars.
Your brothers know that column and the circumscript, the point within a circle.
Oh yeah, that's right here too, the point within the circle. And then we have the all-seeing eye checking you out from the trigger guard. The Fibonacci series, and we really overdid it here, huh? The Fibonacci series of numbers in Roman numerals here. And the beehive of industry at the end down here, because it's kind of shaped like a beehive already. So this is really a Mason's gun for sure. And it's not uncommon to find original Pennsylvania rifles with some little Masonic symbols on here. A good fraction of them have that on them, it was very common back in the 18th century, of course. Oh, yeah, and the other 2 things were the, what do you call it, the level and the
plum.
The level and the plumb things, yeah, they're the side plates. Pretty cool gun.
It hunts well.
Thanks.
How long does it take you to make a gun?
Usually about a month. Something like that's a month's project. Month-long project. Something like this, maybe a little more. I built guns for a very rich guy. You can look at the pictures of the stuff I built for my friend, the Doc. I'll show you the castle he just bought. This little place is in Peoria Heights, Illinois. He's owned the car since 1970. It's a 48 Bentley. But I built all kinds of stuff for him year after year. But if you come up and look at some of the stuff that I built for him.
When did rifling start?
The rifling came on early in the 16th and 15th century. Originally it was straight. It didn't spiral. It was straight so you could load easier. The crud inside the bore would make it very difficult to load if it was a tight, smooth bore. So they grooved it so the ball would go in easier. Some genius said, hey, let me spiral those grooves.
So it's a spiral?
It's a spiral that makes it the rifle. Yeah, it spins the ball. Yeah. It's actually slow. It's not even one turn. It's such a slow spiral in these muzzleloaders, it's not even one turn in the length of this barrel. One turn in 60 inches, so you have to be this long to get a full turn. But a round ball doesn't want to spin very fast. And this shoots a round ball, by the way. 54 caliber shoots a half-ounce ball.
Is Alvin's 50?
Deer hunting rifle. It's a deer rifle.
What caliber is Alvin's?
Alvin's is a fowling piece of 20 gauge, 62 caliber. smooth bore 20 gauge, which is real common in the period. Here's something else. I don't know if you saw this before.
I
Made this for Al.
come to accept this.
He had the point, and I welded on the arms and made the 4th Connecticut Regiment.
I will be putting this to use this weekend.
Yeah, it's just in time.
Against horse.
Does that apply, the principle apply to that as well?
You know, I didn't even take that into account.
Banner will carry it and put it in the ground right in front of our doors.
This is to keep entering the premises.
Yeah, it's a Battle Ridgefield. It's this weekend. It should be a neat event. They closed the whole town down. They're going to fight in the streets.
And pardon my lateness, I just came from the meeting to make sure that the battle with the chief of police closing the road and all the rest of the stuff. Ed Parry's a master gunsmith. And I got the pleasure of meeting Ed. I've actually bought 2 guns from Ed.
Did it?
Yes, one was a committee of 60
That's what that prize. The prize
that gave away during the Battle of Southbury
I forgot about that.
to all the reenactors that came, that were the fastest firing reenactors.
Yeah.
And we lost it, damn it. But and of course now I have the spontoon,
Yeah.
which is a carryover from the parapet fighting and wall fighting that was common in England. Ed's background in 18th century life goes varied. I don't know if he told you his stay at the Winterthur Museum.
No, I used to work for a woman named Ruth Lloyd. Her daddy was Henry DuPont, and she grew up in Winterthur. That was her home. She said it was a terrible place to live because you couldn't put your feet up on the furniture because it was so expensive, you know.
And when I first met Ed, what I found out was, and correct me if I'm wrong, his darling wife is she's such a wonderful host. Way over in the middle of eastern Connecticut, the fire is, I've never been there where there hasn't been a fire and a coffee pot and or tea mostly. But Ed was a submariner.
Yeah.
And his first gun was one of those kits given to him because he was, were you the master?
No, I just a kid. I bought it and I carried it on patrol so I could, you know, while away my idle hours.
And so he's a self-taught in the art of inlaying, scrolling, etching, all those things that you would have had to have a master. He has taken that onto himself, and I'm sure he's had fellows who
If you can read, you can do anything. You know, just get a book, and just read the damn book. It's like a cookbook, you know. And
He's very humble. He's very respected. He's also a member of the Lebanon militia.
yeah.
And he's a pretty good hunter, I'm told.
I used to do good. Well, down on the estate, the DuPont estate, yeah, I used to. I was the gamekeeper.
And this is his second time being at King Solomon's Lodge, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed what it is that you had to offer us.
Thank you very much.